Hello and welcome to The Future Farmer in association with Cars Billington, leading the industry through people, products and innovation. I'm Nick Wallace, and on each episode I'll be exploring an agricultural topic and discovering the technology that can help bring sustainable and profitable solutions to farming. From the science behind good silage to the efficient management of your milking systems. And here's a taster of what's to come in this episode.
And I think we do now and again have to ask, and talk to farmers and bring the idea of reseeds into their programme and management and show them the potential of those grasses and get them to have a look at the varieties, get down on your hands and knees and show them exactly what grass is growing. We know what plants we're growing in the garden. Go and have a look and see what's growing in the field.
Today it's all about reseeding and overseeding, and we'll be looking at holistic approaches to forage management, as well as how and when to think about grassland rotations and the inclusion of multi-species. To do so, we're joined on the Future Farmer podcast by a specialist in grassland and forage crops management, Alex Law.
Yeah, so my name's Alex Law. I work for Cars Billington Agriculture, look after all our kind of forage range, if you like, grass seeds, cereal seeds, turnip seeds, etc. across the whole country, as well as looking after the likes of our silage additives and as our types of pesticides as well.
Alex, just give us an idea of how you got into this part of the industry. What interests you about grassland management?
I did a degree in agriculture down at Harper Adams and worked down there for a while. I also was a stockman out on the west coast of Scotland for a business out there, and travelled around the world and saw agriculture from lots of different aspects. I then went back and did a master's in rural land management and discovered that we could put quite a lot back into agriculture in the way of grassland management, soil restoration, etc. And I went to work for a business that was then about called UK Coal Mining, restoring open cast coal mines across the whole of the UK. And from its demise, I went and straight into Cars Billington, who were suppliers of UK coal mining.
We're going to be talking about reseeding and overseeding today. First of all, give us an introduction to Cars Billington's approach, the holistic approach to forage management.
When I say holistic approach, we do like to see what the customer's trying to achieve. So the end goal, what are they actually trying to grow? What are they trying to grow it for and feed it to? I think that's the best thing to do, is look at where you want the feed. And generally, a lot of the feed we're grazing during the summer, and we're storing grass from the summer for the winter for feeding during the winter period. So it's working out exactly what that customer is requiring and what that demand is from the livestock, or be it cereal, etc., that the customer requires.
How much detail do you drill down into? Are you making management plans with them and looking at things month by month, season by season, or even week by week? Or are you happy to let them tell you what they think they need on a more general level?
We do actually, when I go out onto farm and talk to customers and discuss what they're looking at, I do go right the way through it and give them a kind of try and work out what their goals are and how they're going to achieve them. So looking at rotations of cropping, rotations of stocking, grazing techniques, cutting techniques, it's all one kind of, it's difficult to say, but when you go onto the farm, you start to gather all that information to make your choices.
Let's go through it stage by stage then. Let's start with the brown stuff, the soil. Why is knowing what kind of soil you've got on your farm so important, and how can you help farmers deal with knowing what kind of soil they've got and what the best crop might be for them?
Soil is the kind of, I suppose, is the primary growing medium of everything that exists for us in the way of food, whether it be for the human food chain or for the animal food chain. And we're interested to make sure that that soil has got the right nutrients, is the right pH, and is in a stable form to grow the crop we're looking at. Different crops have different, if you like, bands, categories that they grow best at. But we know that generally a soil with a neutral pH grows a quality crop. So that's why it's very, very important to go into a field, take a soil sample, and look and get an analysis to work out what the pH, the phosphate, the potassium levels are in that soil. Also, it's always good kind of practice, and I do like farmers to do this as well, is to go and dig a hole and have a look at the soil, smell it, feel it, check it smells soily. That sounds a bit stupid, but we do like to smell soil, check that there's plenty of air in it, check there's plenty of movement of earthworms, and we're looking at organic matter. Carbon are big words at the moment. We've got to make sure that these soils are working, not only producing crops, but are in a fit state to go on to producing crops into the future.
What can you do for farmers who perhaps don't have the best quality soil? Are there any things that you can add to the soil or any advice that you can give that could improve the situation?
Yeah, so I tend to, first of all, look at their inputs and stand back and look at their farming business and see what they've done to the soil in the last 5, 10, 15, 20 years, and look and see how they've got the soil to the state it is and how that can be repaired. Sometimes that's due to a lack of inputs in nutrients. Sometimes it's to do with an over input in nutrients. So we get soils with high levels of nutrient can become quite acidic. And it's making sure that we can rectify those issues. We can do that through the application of limes, soil improvers, artificial fertilizers, but we can also do it through root structuring and the kind of crops we're growing in those fields.
Are there any quick fixes, or does soil improvement take time, however you manage it?
There are quick fixes, but it does take time, and we can make all sorts grow with the inputs of artificial fertilizers, if you like. We can have quick gains, but in the long term, it doesn't pay off. You've got to make sure that soil is a stable medium for growing a crop.
Once you've got the soil right or on the right track, do you look at climate at all?
We do, and I suppose we just take it for granted. I kind of cover the country on a national scale, so I'm travelling around about Scotland, down into Wales, England, and we're aware of what different parts of the country rainfall's like generally, seeing what's happening, what the aspects the farmer is faced with. So you'll find in this country, on the east side of the country, it's been a lot drier than the west side in the last week. Customers are ringing up from the west saying my grass seed's growing fine. Customers that bought grass seed on the east side will find that due to no rain, it's not growing as well. So we do get similar questions in different parts of the country, and different people talking about what the weather's doing. And that's become ever more apparent with dry summers and wet winters. Not as much cold weather, and people finding that the grasses are growing nearly all year round in some warmer places.
That's interesting. Does that affect the type of grass that you recommend a farmer would use for any particular sward, or is it more to do with the positioning of the land or the type of the soil or its drainage, etc.?
We're looking at the soils and the drainage and everything, but also with dry summers, people are looking to. We've seen it this summer where people are finding a couple of months of dry weather, grass slows down, it doesn't grow as fast, it throws a seed head quickly. We have to top those seed heads or cut them and make silage of them and begin the growing process again. So we're actually looking more into root structures and the quality of those grass plants and the way they grow. So we're actually looking at root depths and penetration down into the soil and where the moisture is still in the soil for growth. So again, the climate change and if it is climate change, the kind of warm, the dry weather, we must look at the crops that are suitable for growing through this.
And presumably crop selection has a huge amount to do with what your farmer is trying to produce, whether it's grass-finished livestock or milk production or whatever.
Yeah, and that farmer at the end of the day is wanting something to feed his livestock on, and we've got to make sure we can achieve that. He soon rings up when it isn't there.
So what kind of levels of advice are you giving? Give me an example of a particular farmer and what advice you gave him about what he was trying to achieve and what crops he should be using.
So at Cars Billington, we're busy looking at things like whether the farmers may be wanting to finish some lambs for getting them prepared for market, or getting them to a point where they're gradable for meat production. And we're looking at things like what grasses or perhaps mixtures of stubble turnips and things like that, kales, rapes. We would be looking to see whether we could increase their growth rates and finish those lambs off. So going on to a farm and discussing the farmer's requirements and where he perhaps finds a shortfall in grassland production, filling that shortfall with other crops is a common thing. And we look at that, probably we're looking about 6 months ahead to see what the livestock might need. At the moment, we're looking around the November, December, Christmas time, and what livestock he'll have on the farm and he'll still want to be grazing outside with.
Tell me about the grass varieties on the recommended lists. Why is there a recommended list? What purpose does it serve, and how useful is it to individual farmers?
The recommended list is a national list which the plant breeders across the UK are entering their varieties onto it. Now there's stringent tests on those varieties, so there's a huge grass seed breeding programs going on behind the scenes where many varieties are bred for their different qualities, their heading dates, the protein contents, their sugar contents. All these things are looked at and they're all brought together, and they're looking for the highest quality grass seeds to sell on the market and are available for the customers to get the best potential yields they can. And that recommended list, you'll find it'll alter year in year as new varieties come along, and we want the farmers to be able to get the best varieties available on the market. So when we're selecting grass seed varieties for our customers and we're designing mixes with our supplying companies, at Cars Billington, we would be busy looking to see what would we get the best out of a grass seed blend for a farmer growing grass for his livestock.
And you presumably have a role in educating the farmer as to what's coming down the chain, what's coming down the line, the new products, and how they could improve things. What kind of discussions do you have around that? Because I guess if something does come on the market that is going to make even a marginal gain, providing the cost isn't too much, a farmer is going to want to know about it. But of course, trying something new is always a risk.
Trying something new is always a risk, but when you look at the data and the potential of some of these varieties and the yields that these varieties can give, it's a risk that's well worth taking. And I think we do now and again have to ask, and talk to farmers and bring the idea of reseeds into their program and management and show them the potential of those grasses and get them to have a look at the varieties. Get down on your hands and knees and show them exactly what grass is growing. We know what plants we're growing in the garden. Go and have a look and see what's growing in the field and show them what they have the potential to do.
You presumably have to build up quite a relationship of trust with your customers in that regard.
A very large element of trust, and farmers are ringing me, I would say 7 days a week, ringing up and asking questions, stopping me on the roadside when I'm travelling to and from different customers, talking to me regularly. Our own staff are busy asking questions. It's some people are do get very worried about beginning the process of starting a reseed, and will it work and will it happen? There's a lot of money to be invested in a reseed, and I think it's important that those customers trust what you do, and you give them as much knowledge as you possibly can, and you hold their hand through the process. And you're there when they've got problems. I've been out this morning talking to customers that are worried about germination of grass seeds due to dry weather. And we've dug some plants up, we've found plants, we've found roots, and they're growing fantastically. Now it's rained. Everybody's happy.
Let's talk about the rejuvenation and maintaining of older swards up against establishing new grass swards and grassland rotations. It's a science in itself. So give me an overview from soup to nuts. What's the importance when you're establishing a new grass sward? Why should you also look at rejuvenating older swards, and how would you go about that?
So, in many ideal situations, a farmer will be considering ploughing a field. He'll do his soil test. He'll look at his structure. Ploughing a field is a very, very good way, and it's an old-fashioned, tried and tested way of removing old varieties of grasses and actually burying them out of the way. I suppose ploughing is the removal of trash and turning it upside down and starting again and getting a fresh start. It works very, very well, and you're able to put in your new seeds and they will grow successfully in the field, as long as the nutrients and everything are correct. That works very, very well. We have to be a bit careful how deep you plough that grassland, because you can turn quite a lot. A lot of the nutrient that we're looking at grass growth is in the top 10, 15 centimetres, and we plough a field, we turn that to the bottom. So we do have to be a bit careful on what we do to the nutrient in that topsoil and that topsoil structure. But we do get, with the plough, we get a very, very clean, fresh start. It's an opportunity to level up fields and get a good, clean break. The other option is to do what we would class as an overseeding, where we're actually drilling into the sward as it currently stands. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing that. Some people will make an application of glyphosate across the surface and burn out the existing vegetation and direct drill into the old sward. There's quite a lot of seed burden in that grass, so seeds from the grasses of this year and previous years, and sometimes they get a head start over the new varieties of grass seed that we're trying to establish. So it's making sure that you've got a decent enough tilth to grow that grass in. We've got to remember, grass seeds like to be buried. I bet farmers will smile at this one. Half a little fingernail below the surface. So it's pretty accurate stuff. It's better than, we have a very careful measurement. Half a little fingernail below the surface. And we've got to make sure that's correct. If it's any deeper than that, it'll rot. And if it's on the surface, it's got to find its roots into the soil. So we do like to try and get it just below the surface. Now, overseeding comes into itself, where we've perhaps got a meadow or a pasture that we've maybe had some heavy grazing, or it's got poached in some way, and the customer needs a quick fix and to get some new grass seeds established in there. Also, with a lot of the environmental schemes, we're not able to maybe plough, and overseeding is a very, very good option, or perhaps where there's a lot of stone in the ground.
What's the practical reality of overseeding? How do you do it?
Literally, we would go across and the seed is placed with a drill just below the surface of the soil, half a little fingernail below the surface of the soil, and we make sure that's placed and it's pressed in with the drill, if you like, and we await the grass starting to grow.
Tell me about grassland rotations. What can you advise farmers on that side of things?
Grass has never really been talked about in a huge way in rotation. Like the arable world of cereals, we would be rotating cereal crops every year. But grassland rotations, we're finding in the world of grass management, the herbicides and the insecticides are becoming harder to use. Harder to source as well, and we're finding that actually grass does sometimes require a break. So it's interesting to look at grassland and say how long we intend that grass to be growing for, so whether it's a 5-year lay or a 10-year lay, and actually breaking that cycle of the crop. And sometimes we're putting in products there, things like stubble turnips, kales, rapes, to give it a 6-month break and allow the soil just to settle down. It gives us a good opportunity to see what weeds we've got coming before putting a new grass seed variety or crop into the ground. And also that rotation gives the farmer, let's say he does 10% of his farm a year with a reseed, at least he's getting a new part of his farm every year coming through the rotation. So increased production 10% of his farm.
Why is it important to have multi-species of grass when you are having these discussions?
Again, multi-species are very, very useful. It's a very, very general term, is multi-species. We're now talking about multi-species in the when we're looking at environmental schemes, as in lots of herbal ways, etc., with multi-species. Grassland multi-species are important as well. We don't just want one variety of grass in one field. It's all right if you were growing grass seed, but you would have one heading date, and you would have a grass would grow so long it would then stop, and you would probably have either little growth in the spring or little growth in the autumn, and that's why we have different varieties in there to give us different periods of growth throughout the year. The multi-species in the kind of herbal aspects, we would look at, it's being beneficial to soil structure and also to animal health, and they do enjoy grazing them, higher proteins such as your clovers, chicories and plantains. So there's a wide range of reasons for growing different kinds of species in a sward.
I see. I appreciate that there are differences then in having multi-species of grass and multi-species going beyond grass into herbs and light, particularly when you're grazing. If we could just focus on the multi-species of grass for a moment, is it susceptibility to disease that's the problem, or is it just the harvesting? Because I would have thought that a farmer would want whatever delivers the best nutritional content, but you're saying actually it's multi-species can help in terms of making sure you've got an all year round or a longer supply period.
Yeah, so we're looking at supply. We're also looking at, I know if you had one variety of grass seeds in there, you'd probably find you'd end up with a very, very leafy silage. So if we were harvesting it, you'd probably find that there's not as much fibre in if we had one variety of grass seeds in. So if we were to put some timothy or some cocksfoot into that mix, we've got a lot more fibre in with the cut, if you like. So again, and they've got deeper rooting capabilities, and in a dry season like this season, we're still seeing a good yield from those grasses.
Does that cause complications with harvesting? Are you talking about multi-seeding in the same field?
No, that comes all mixed in the bag. Yeah, don't worry about it. It comes all mixed in the bag. So everything's in the bag ready. When the proportions of the seeds are there, mixed in, ready for the customer just to apply.
When you've got your swards established, how important is it to continue monitoring the grass production?
Yeah, so as soon as you've gone out and you've actually sown your seeds, you need to be going back and just checking that the establishment and how they're establishing. Consolidation is very, very important at the point of sowing, and making sure that the customer has been out and rolled that ground and made sure that the soil to seed contact is good. And then it's making sure that they establish. The biggest problem we find in newly established grassland can often be the weed infestations, especially in mild conditions like we've got now. And weeds can grow a lot faster than new grass seeds. So it's making sure that those weeds are controlled. First of all, we would look at mechanical means of control, or even grazing with livestock, light grazing with livestock to control them before we consider the application of herbicides.
How difficult is that if you're dealing with a vast area that's got a weed that's taken hold and runs the risk of choking the grass or not allowing the grass to establish? How tricky does it become when you're dealing with vast areas of farmland?
I think the area isn't the problem, it's how fastly it can establish, and if the weather conditions don't allow you to get to that field to do something about it. So, for example, chickweed in a new sown lay, you can say in a fortnight it'll have completely taken over the grass. And if the weather conditions haven't been suitable to either harrow it out of the sward or apply a pesticide, a herbicide, you would, it can take over and you have to start the process again. And we many times I've leant on gates with farmers and saying, "We've lost that one. I'm afraid
I was going to ask. That must be
that
must be a difficult conversation to have sometimes.
Yeah, and we've all been there, and we've all seen it, and we've all had the conversation. And sadly, that's farming.
So you must get a considerable amount of satisfaction when you go along, maybe to a new area or an area that you've put a new product in and it is established. You've got a happy farmer, and you got lucky with the weather, and it's going great guns.
And it looks absolutely fantastic, and it's working fine. This morning, I have been out to a customer who bought some land off a company I used to work for in the coal mining industry, and I've been back there and stood 100 metres above where I was standing a few years ago when I worked for the coal mining company, and I established that grassland, it's 7-8 years ago, and it's growing fantastically. And when you can stand back and look at those landscapes and realise the potential they've got, it's fantastic. And being able to advise those farmers on what to do and what to do into the future.
Looking forward to the future must obviously be a key part of what you have to do, because you're a custodian of the landscape, which will exist long after we're gone. Topsoil is an issue, isn't it? It's a global issue, and you hear frightening statistics like there's only 100 more seasons left to farm topsoil effectively before all the nutrients come out. I mean, presumably the future isn't anywhere near as bleak as what some of the doom-mongers are saying, given the technologies and the expertise that's coming into the industry in order to make sure that soil remains in good shape and continues to provide what farmers need.
In some parts of the world, it is getting to critical points. And you do have to realise that in some parts of the world, we're feeding crops straight from fertiliser bags, and we're relying on fertiliser bags and moisture. And sadly, we've got to look at carbon cycles, organic matter contents. These are the soil tests that we're doing now, and we need to be doing into the future. Organic matter helps us maintain moisture in soils, and if we can look after that, we've got crops, and we can look ahead and we can grow them. We've got to make sure that we're treating this with a lot of science. I mean, agriculture is an art and a science, but we've got to get it right, and doing both those things. We've got to perfect it with what the customer requires, but also what the environment and the landscape, etc., requires.
And presumably the customers are becoming more and more aware of that. I mean, I've been hearing over the course of these podcasts that Britain leads the way in a number of areas in farming. What's your understanding of that acknowledgement within the seeding and soil management?
Yeah, we're leading the way in the rest of the world. When you look at what we're achieving in this country, and how quickly we're having to diversify to cope with moisture and milder winters, etc. A breeding program of a grass variety can take up to 15 years. Tell me what the weather will be like here in 15 years' time. It is. There's a lot of crystal ball gazing to be done to work out what are these farmers going to require. What are we going to look at in the way of food production in 15 years' time? Are farmers still, what are they going to be? What are we going to be producing on what kind of scales?
When farmers have these kinds of questions, you say you take calls 7 days a week. If this is a new project that they want to take on, presumably you guys are available to offer advice and do some early stage testing with the farmers and just have those discussions about what they might want to be trying to achieve.
Yeah, invite us out onto the farms, have the conversations with us, and let's just be honest and say, well, what do you want out of it? Where do you see yourself in 15, 20 years' time? How are we going to improve the production of your farm? In some cases, we're not. We're going more into the environmental schemes. And it's being able to know what their end goals are and what we need to produce, supply to them, what their requirements are.
And presumably in a way that makes cost-effective sense. Otherwise, there's no point.
Cost-effective sense, yeah, exactly. But you're only as good as the last bag of grass seed you sold, and you've got to make sure you do it properly.
Alex, it's been absolutely fascinating talking to you. I really do appreciate it, and getting just a flavour of your expertise is quite an education. So thank you very much indeed for your time today.
Thank you.
Well, that's it. Thanks for listening to the Future Farmer podcast in association with Cars Billington. For more information about some of the issues discussed in this episode, search for the Cars Billington website. Once there, you can email with your inquiry, or if you've a question about feeds, machineries, agricultural and rural supplies, or fuels, there are Cars Billington experts on the other end of the phone. Listen out for future episodes, and don't forget to like and subscribe so we know if we're answering all your questions. I'm Nick Wallace, and until next time, keep safe and keep farming.